So the problem is we're going to start with a different, that's fine. We really didn't do any data changes, so it doesn't really matter where I'm at. All right, so I'm bringing back up. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes.
River Valley, yeah, we're in our copy that's now in our office down in Richmond, just so you know. I'm going to pick a teacher just because I like teachers because they usually have a lot of stuff. Mark Bollinger? Mark Bollinger. Okay. One thing to note, by the way, is I often see people opening up cards just to get to like the other auth screen or something or the rate screen. And you really don't have to do that. I mean, I could just do it from here, right? And so a lot of people don't realize that pretty much all the ribbon, all the fact boxes, the actions, the navigate are 100% identical or should be pretty much 100% identical between the list and cards pages. So if you do find a discrepancy, let us know because that wasn't intentional. So the idea is that you can actually get to it from either place. So a lot of people keep going into the cards, but they have no intention of changing or even viewing anything on the cards. And it's just one more click. So, again, if you see people doing that, you might want to say, it'd be easier if you just went right off there. In terms of the way the navigation, last time we talked about it, these are really the first two sections here, employee and position, and even analysis, really are all kind of HR in a way, except for statistics, which is really more payroll related. But the payroll stuff is right here, if you will. And in certain areas, we've kind of highlighted and we've promoted up into the action ribbon things like jobs, rates, tax auth info, and other auth info and pay distribution. All of those have been promoted. And the reason they've been promoted is because, well, they're the ones that you kind of play with a lot. The other ones you go to much less often. One thing, by the way, we do have a U.S. bonds feature, which we're, I think, going to kill because I don't think anybody anymore is using that. I don't think it used to be back in the day, school districts allowed people to buy U.S. savings bonds through payroll deductions, and there was some specialized setups there to say when it was time they've put enough aside to buy a new bond. So I don't know. I haven't seen that in a long time, so that's why we pretty much don't see that being used anymore. We only had one district use it, and they don't use it anymore. So I think it's time for it to be removed. Let's go do it from the home perspective, and let's. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually skip jobs for now, and then we're going to come back to jobs and spend a decent amount of time on jobs. And so we're going to go through rates, tax auth info, other auth info, pay distribution as the four, and then we're going to kind of then attack jobs, and then we'll attack some other stuff. Okay, so let's just talk about sorry, that was not the right thing. Let's talk about rates. Okay, so this person has some rates. Rates are things that are either factor driven like percents or per pay amounts or per month amounts or per annual amounts. The unit of measure is not a field you can change there. It just comes in from a setup somewhere else where you end up setting up those payroll rate codes. You can determine what kind of unit of measure it is. And the reason we're doing that is just to tell the person who's entering these rates what unit of measure are they thinking. Are they thinking in percents? Are they thinking per pay? How are they thinking? They basically are put in as needed. One of the things that's a little bit difficult is that when you do the lookup here, they're just purely in an alphabetical list. And so it's really kind of important, I feel, to get these out in Excel and possibly for the district, write some notes on each one of them to explain when they will be used, when they will not be used. Some of these may not be used at all. They may just be in the rate table, but they never actually were used, and I can almost look at these first leave ones, and I suspect that they're actually not used. That's usually coming now from leave groups. This is the old way that we used to do it. The problem is that they're just being carried around from database to database to database, and they're just in this list. So one thing I will tell you kind of at a high level is that if you decide to go after and delete a rate and it's being used anywhere, it will not allow you to delete it, which is good. I mean, it's good in many different ways because almost if you went in and tried to delete every single one and only deleted the ones you could delete, you would actually cleanse the system because unless somebody set up a new control right then, if the rate's not being used on an employee or it's connected to a payroll control, it probably has no bearing. It's probably just being left over and carried over. I'm not a big fan of leaving rate codes in there because I think operators get confused by them, but that's just my own opinion. But regardless, once you trim this list down to a manageable list, it's nice to push to Excel and then write comments on it to explain when these rates might be used. And the reason I'm making that point is that some of these rates, well, I just changed the rate to something. I don't even know what it was before. Anybody know what it was before? Whatever. I can say no. There we go. Got it back. That's good. Anyway, the rates, some of these rates may not relate to the employee rate table. You can have employer rates and you can have union rates. So rates are used in 3 different places. And this rate code lookup, you really don't know where it's being used. I can't happen to know that if I go to the union ones, for instance, down here, these union dental ones and so forth, I know they're the ones that we saw earlier on the union card. So again, the payroll rate, the payroll rate are rates that can be used as fixed amounts, percents, whatever, and it can be used at an employer, employee, and union. Those are 3 places that rates can be entered. I don't know of any other place. Anybody else on the phone might know. I just don't know any other place a rate could be used. But I can't tell by looking at this list. And also, in addition, I think there's rates in here that aren't used. Again, an example would be to go to advanced. Whoops, I keep switching it. If I go to advanced on this, and I go into, let's say, one of the ones I was just talking about, one of those leave ones, and I'll say I'm going to go ahead and delete all these guys because I keep forgetting I'll go edit list, and I can go delete. Well, I think I can go delete. Can't see that message. The payroll rate code is in use in payroll control code. This is a message, by the way, that's actually confusing. This payroll rate code is in use in payroll control code. Payroll method step code. Huh. What that means, by the way, I think it's on a payroll control, which we haven't taught you how to configure yet. But so again, that's why it's not letting me delete this. So I can hit F5, I can skip that. I'm assuming all of them are going to be like that. Yeah. All right. So we'll come back to that. But anyway, let's go to rate. So rate is set up. RV Teacher, I have no idea what RV Teacher is. What is RV Teacher? River Valley Teachers Association. Okay. So that's the code they're using to indicate how much union dues for the Teacher Association for River Valley is going to be deducted per pay. Now, this active flag next to it, I want to explain that, and I want to explain the effective date. But as an example of the effective date, you kind of see a good example here. So the rate was 11%, and then on 7/1/2014, it became 12%. So just to show you how normally when we're changing the rates, changing the amounts, whatever, we're putting a new record in. We're not actually just changing the rate. So that's something that I think is important to understand. Union way, they're doing $3 per pay as an example. Now this active flag I want to show you. So let's just say this is connected to a payroll control. One of the things you have the ability to do is to say, well, what control is it related to? And that's what this related payroll control is. So we talked a while back about reporting authorities and how they connect to vendors. Well, in the rate screen, how does the rate code connect to a payroll control code? Or how does a reporting authority connect to a payroll control code? And so it's kind of hard to figure it out. It would take quite a bit of analysis. So we kind of do it for you in a sense that this related payroll controls just automatically goes out and scans the system and finds any payroll controls that use this rate code called United Way. So if I click it, it'll probably just bring up one, and it's AT. It's an after-tax United Way is what that, I'm sure that AT is standing for. So it's after-tax deduction. It is active. It's not suspended, which is what this option here means, and I can explain that later on when we talk about batch processes, and so forth and so on. And I'll explain more about payroll controls a little bit later, so we'll explain these fields a little bit more deeply. But the point is that this control has to be active. When we first bring these controls onto the employees, almost all controls are inactive. Things that are automatically active would be things like federal income tax, state income tax, Medicare, EE and ER, Social Security, EER. Things we know you can't live without. Everybody's going to have them. But anything else that's possibly optional, we won't bring them over active, and they will auto-activate by simply putting in the rate. As you put the rate in, it will auto-activate for you. So that's basically how that works. So when you see active, you can't filter, you can't click on that. What it's actually is not a real field. It's actually a field that's just being sort of interactively filled in by looking at the related payroll control and giving you either active or inactive. Inactive would look like this. If I just decide to inactivate, it says, you sure you really want to do that? And you hit OK, and now it says inactive. Okay, what that means is, you have to make some decisions of process and procedure. So when the employee calls up, and maybe someday this will be on the benefit enrollment side, so they'll do it on their own, but forgetting that for a second, they call up or they send a note in to payroll and say, please stop my United Way as of the future date of X. Well, a typical way that you could do that would be in a rate screen. All you'd have to do is go ahead and put another record in, and you could say, starting on 04 April 1, just put 0 in there. And that's a way that it will take care of it. And if I hit F5, by the way, this will become active. The reason that became active, by the way, is just the action of me putting another record in there turned it back on. Okay? So there's two ways really to stop things. One is to put a 0 value in on an employee rate in a future date, or you can go to the related payroll control and inactivate it. And that's fine. I think either one is fine to do. It's just really up to you guys in terms of what you want to do. If you don't want to put the 0 record value in, but you want to leave the $3 there, then the only way to shut it off would be to really turn off that control. If you want to leave the control active, I recommend you do leave it active because of the statistics. And let me see if I'm right or wrong about this. So right now, because it used to be that I would leave the statistics screen, so if it was inactivated. So let me go to statistics. Okay, and statistics show up two panels that I don't pay much attention to. Okay, paycheck panel on the earnings, on the expenses. None of that seems very interesting. I actually typically close those. This is the one that you want. It's actually the one that makes sense. And it gives it to you for quarter to date, year to date, fiscal to date, balance, if it's kind of a forever balance thing, like a leave balance. But if I go to United Way, there's $21. It is showing up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the rate screen. And I am going to just remove this record, and I'm going to go to related controls, and I'm going to deactivate it. Okay, I'm going to close this now, go to navigate, go to statistics, go to statistics, and it is still there. That's good. So the system is smart enough to see it there. That's good. I was afraid that maybe it actually would remove it because it's inactivated. And I think the way it works is as long as it's in the list of payroll controls under the employee card, it'll build the statistics screen to see if there's any dollars there. So that's good. That doesn't cause any problems at all. That's good to know. Sorry. That was just the absolute wrong button. Okay, so back to rates, and I'm going to just reactivate this so that we can see it. Okay, and I can just activate it. Okay. All right, so that's the reason why we have this field there. People don't understand. They're kind of trying to click the field. They're trying to make it go from inactive to active. They don't understand that just by using this and putting data in there, it'll activate, and then yet you can go to the related controls and turn it off and turn it on. Okay, so that's just simply how that works, and we do recommend that if there's a rate change, you put a new record in with an effective date with the new rate. And 0 is just as valid. So it's okay to leave it active and have the rate be 0. It doesn't cause any problems. So that's kind of how rates work. We do have this field called activation code, which we do not use. I haven't personally used it. It's workable in the system. It's designed to not use the effective date, but to use some kind of algorithm, do an activation where it activates 90 days after their start date. That's the design of what it's used for. I've just never set it up that way and never trained anybody to use it that way, and I'm not sure how to do it, but evidently it is usable for that type of thing. If you decide not to use it and the operators are getting confused, just encourage them to go ahead and do what I would do, which is just to remove it. And that'd be that. Well, while I'm here, I do want to explain why these other fields are here. So as you notice, we have employee number, employee name, location, default job, class code, search name, and search number. So all 6 of those are kind of always there. They're always hidden behind the scenes. And the idea would be to do something like this. You would add them all, let's just say, not the activation code, and you probably would move them around. I'll just do that real quick just to... Okay, and the search name is nice because you can then filter on it. You can't filter on employee name. We've talked about that before. I'm going to remove social security number, employee location, default job, maybe, class code. Okay, so I'm just going to throw that out there now at this point. And that's all great. You see that. It's different rate codes and all that. But what you'd be doing with this, the reason you'd be interested in this is you'd be killing this and adding most likely a rate code. Let's just go payroll rate code and I guess RV. And so therefore you would have all of them together, and you'd be able to see who they are and so forth. It's kind of like basically an easy way to proof your data. Maybe you expect them all to be the same amount, but yet one of them is slightly off. You can see actually one is slightly off. I just saw, $179. Is that a mistake? I don't know. So that being some of the kind of reasons. Of course, you can send this to Excel and do all that normal kind of stuff as well. So I just want you to know that that's capable there. You cannot filter again on the employee name because it's concatenated and built on the fly, but you can on the search name. So you could do that as well. So that's the reason why we have all these fields hidden, to break filters, show it, and do other things. Either mass update right now, just boom, 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 but more importantly, probably just figure out if there's anomalies and things like that. So anyway, so that's the rate table. I'm going to move now to the tax auth info table, unless there's any questions about employee rates.
I just had a question. So, when you change, the insurance rate or whatever, it automatically changes to every employee then?
No. Right here, I'm only on this employee. I'm on this guy, right?
Okay.
Now, let me clean my screen up again because now I got all these here. I want to remove them because it kind of gets confusing when you're actually doing normal data entry. Okay, good. Yeah. So when I'm on here, I'm on employee rates for this ID for this person, right? So this is just simply the rates for this employee. And we use employee rates when the values for the inputs, if you will, cannot be determined except at the employee level. And I gave you the classic examples, wage attachments. Obviously, Joe's wage attachment is going to be different than Peter's, right?
Sure.
And so that's why the employee rate table lives, is because it can't be built at a higher level. It's not like a filing status that says if you're family, it's going to be this amount, and if you're single, it's this amount. It's just you are, because of who you are, it's this amount. The SCRS and STRS board and EE, that was a very difficult sort of decision to use rates there versus the next area we're going to go into, which is the other auth. Well, the 2 areas. We're going to get to it in a second. We're going to do tax auth first. And normally around the country, we've used the other auth and a filing status to indicate what level, if you will, this person is at, because often in most retirement systems in this country, it's based on kind of when you started. And so if you started many, many moons ago, you're grandfathered in, and so you're considered to be in the class, let's just say A. And then if you started between X and Y, you're in class B. And let's say there might be 6 classes. And that's what we typically find nationwide. Ohio presented us this whole pickup on pickup thing, know. And it sounds like that was a way to attract in certain people into districts that may not work in the public sector otherwise. And so they developed this scheme, if you will, to get around the compensation requirements that are kind of imposed on by, I guess, the state legislative. So because of that, we had a difficult time dealing with the fact that they were basically cutting deals. They were saying, look, I'll pick up half of yours your employee portion. I'll pick up 3/4 of your, I mean, they're basically, kind of in the back stalls, negotiating, right? And so because of that, we could not build all the different sort of possible finite choices of how those negotiations would turn out. And so that's what got us into having to set up rates. And then what's bad about that is that 90% of the people are falling within the same, maybe even 95% of the district, maybe more, are falling within the same pattern that could have been done in a simple kind of more filing status orientation. But we had to build all this just to deal with those 5 people in the district that are the exceptions, if that makes any sense. So that's that's the history behind why we have rates as opposed to something I think a little bit more simplistic, personally. So, and again, I'm not sure if we have an example, but if you guys know somebody at River Valley in which they have sort of this scenario, I can bring them up. It's hard for me to know without, knowing who the person is. This doesn't even make any sense to me anyway, because it looks like they have both. Now, this is not a problem because of something we're going to learn on the job side, which is that the earnings themselves can be classified as being SERS earnings or STRS earnings. And so therefore, this person, let's say is a teacher, doesn't have any STRS earnings, and therefore it doesn't have any actual contributions or employer amounts being computed, board amounts or E amounts. So that's kind of that. But let's go to the tax auth record. Again, I'm still on Mark. On this screen, again, it's one of the screens that can be done through the self-service. The main things that we allow in the self-service is the ability to pick single and allowances, as well as, I don't think we can do income tax exempt, but extra withholding they definitely can. So I think the 3 things they can pick on the self-service is are you married or not, what's your allowances, and extra withholding. So in here you have federal and Ohio state tax, although I thought you may have another one here for that local tax. Don't you have a local tax in River Valley as well?
Should be Marion, yes.
Yeah, I just don't know. Is it all the same? Let me just pick somebody else just randomly. I just thought there'd be another record there, I guess. Maybe I'm just wrong.
Well, Andrew.
Yeah.
River Valley's out in the country, so some of them may not have, some of them may live in the country and don't have city taxes, others may.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that probably makes sense. Let me see if I actually just kill my filter. I can work backwards a little bit and see if I see anything besides. Yeah, there's like this person. So if I say who is that person, remember I've got those columns hidden right now, but I can always go help about, and I can see that it's, if I go to the table fields, actually I don't even have to see it that far, BRO 10. So if I go to BRO 10, there we go, and I go there, voila. So that's an example. Now this one, this Marion still baffled me a little bit because I would expect this tax percent to have been filled in at this point. So I'm just not sure exactly what's going on there. But let's just talk about federal and Ohio state tax. And again, our database could be out of date and whatever. But yeah, so the federal record, it's active. The related controls, if you click on this, should come up, just be FIT, and it's active, so that's pretty straightforward. One thing is also nice, some people don't notice that you can actually just get the amounts right there and drill them right to the ledger. So it's kind of actually interesting that, some people forget you can actually just do that. You have an effective date. So when we do a transaction on the Employee Resource Center where they're putting a request in to increase, let's say, their allowances by 1, then when the system processes it, it's going to process it with an effective date, and they've indicated the effective date on the screen, and that's what you're going to see. Okay. And so that's an example of increasing their allowances to 1, but yet showing me the layers of history. And that's, again, now when they actually come on the system, they're going to just see the current values. They don't really see all this history. You have the history. They don't see the history that way. So I just want you to know that.
So even if they change their own through the ERC, did I say that right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it'll put that on their screen like that?
Yes, it will not just change a value. We always create a new record.
Okay.
We do what we train you to do. If you
Okay.
know what I mean. So in code, we actually try to mimic what we think is good, what is his best practices.
Okay.
Because the design of this effective date is from the very early on. The guy that originally wrote this a billion years ago. I mean, I was in a training session, and he said, I wrote this way so that you wouldn't have to dig very far to figure out the history. And again, it's up to you how you use it, but that's how I advise you use it, and that's how I meant it to be used. So I said, okay, fine, you say so. So anyway, so that's kind of what's happening there. So really, I just think, yes, you have the income tax exempt, which generally you only click, I think, for like maybe students or pretty rare situations, but for the most part, that's it. Extra withholding is extra withholding per paycheck. It's not per month, per year, but it's per paycheck. So that's how that works. And one thing to note is that we do have a payroll journal switch in the payroll journal batches, basically, that says that if you actually process a payroll in this batch and you've indicated to skip extra withholding, the system will skip extra withholding. And they find that's important, generally speaking, during summer pay situations where they're not making much money, and sometimes they're trying to sock away a bunch of money, and it just makes no sense for them to do this large extra withholding on a very small amount of money that's being paid kind of offline, if you will. So, if you're doing these like little mini batches of little amounts, extra withholding becomes more of they complain about it, basically. So just you can shut the whole journal off, basically, because you don't want to have to go to these like 50 employees and do something. So can I do it for the whole run? And we have that ability, just so you know that. I just want to just kind of put that out there. I'll go ahead and kill this record, and there we go. By the way, while you're on the rate screen or any of these screens, one of the navigate options you always have is change log entries. And so if I click on this, the system should be tracking, and I'm absolutely getting no information. So that means most likely that, unless I've got a mistake in here, let me just double check. Let me see. Maybe we do have a mistake. Bill, you recording me, by the way? Yep, he's recording me.
Yes, I'm recording.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at this. This is the federal record. Yeah. Primary key field 25401. This actually may be appropriate. Actually, I'm withdrawing my comments because this data could have been converted in, therefore there was no change log entry. And let me just insert a record here just to make sure this is working fine. I think it's probably fine. I'm going to go. Oh, hold on, I haven't finished it. Oh, all right, I'm putting the effective date in. That's right. 0501. And I'm going to go single. Where's single? Single 1. Okay, so now I'm going to ask for change log entries. I also want to make sure they come up. I don't know. I'm not sure why I'm not getting change log entries. Is that table not on? Because when I click this, I see entries. But these are entries of 2015-0401. Yeah, I think we've got a little problem, Bill. It's a problem in River City. Here's what the problem is. I'll explain the problem, unless you guys can figure it out. You see this? So it's trying to find records that have this, and it's that date that's my problem. Because when the system is putting the date actually in the record, watch what happens. You see it? They've changed the program recently somewhere down the line, which this didn't expect, and it's actually inverting the date. And so therefore it's never finding it when the date is the last field in the primary key. This applies, Bill, to several places in our system where we're running change log pages, where we're providing quick access to change logs. It's basically got a problem now because when Microsoft upgraded to this latest version, they changed the way it's writing out a date field. I don't know why they did that. 2015-0401. Anybody have any idea? I have no idea. So in other words, there's my 2501 transaction. See them? It's an insertion. Tax authority code went from blank to federal. Effective date went from new value local. Ooh. Interesting. But it's in other words, this is kind of like the date value in, I guess, what they consider to be international terminology. I don't know, whatever. And this is like local, in other words, U.S., North American. But this is new to me. I haven't seen that before. So, Bill, just we'll talk after this call about this more in detail, okay?
Okay.
But let's just remind me we need to talk about this. This is definitely a flaw that needs to be fixed. Sorry about that.
I'm going to quit coming to these training sessions.
I tell you, you have no idea.
Every time I come, I'm writing up more work orders.
I know. Oh my God. Yeah. So that's just how the tax authority system works. I'm not sure about this city, Marion, because I would think there would need to be a tax rate based on their codes, but their codes are empty here, which usually would not be the case. It'd be filled in. So I'm just not completely sure why they're not filled in, whether this data just wasn't converted correctly, whether the tax is not working correctly. Marion is in what county, guys?
Marion.
Is Marion a county?
Yeah.
Okay, and so maybe would that be the rate? Would that look like a normal rate for Marion? 0.75%?
For their school, Elgin, yes.
Yeah. There's only one school district in this county?
No, there's several, but not all of them have income tax rates.
Yeah. Normally you would have all the ones listed. It's just kind of weird the way this is set up. I just don't know how you guys have really set all that up, so I'm just not completely sure about all that. The concept typically with a tax level at this point is that basically county and school district, not the municipality, generates a rate. And so even if it just generated zero, it still would have a value. Every one would have a value in there for these two columns right here, and then whether the rate's there or not depends on whether it's just taxation at that rate. But to have it blank seems odd to me. I'm not sure what else it's doing then. If I go to the related payroll controls, it is doing a calculation. So obviously it is doing something. I'm not sure what it's doing, but it's calculating something. $36.03 on 1801, which let me just do 1801 point, whoops. Clear around 1801.58 times point, what was it, 700? Yeah, 0.00, whoops, times 0.0075. Yeah, I don't know where that number's coming from, so I'm not really sure. We'll have to look at that control later on. I'm not going to worry about it at this point. Okay, so that's the tax authority. It's mainly for federal, state, and possibly local filing statuses, allowances, extra withholding, effective date driven. Payroll controls can relate to it. You can turn them off, turn them on, but obviously not sure you want to do that. There's no setup anywhere for Social Security and Medicare. It's just on by definition, and if you brought up the payroll controls, then you could flip them off, but otherwise they're on. And so I just want you to know that there's no place, there's nothing that has to be done from an onboarding perspective or maintenance perspective to turn off or on Medicare and Social Security. In the other off screen, we've got things used. In this case, they're using it for a life insurance level. I guess this is employer life. I'm not completely sure if that's true or not. I'm going to click on this. It looks like I've got it theoretically active for both life accruals and for pre-tax life deduction. Looks like both of them are theoretically active, although the only one that's showing is this one right here. And then there's a filing status. Let's just take a look at the filing statuses. So I don't know exactly what this is doing. I suspect there's some kind of percentage or some calculation. We'd have to look at it to see what it's doing. But somebody who set up this control wants to know what filing status is this person in, and then it's active. I'm not sure if everybody has got this. Let me just pick somebody randomly. I'll just do a middle school teacher. And let's see if they've got the life as well. Yeah. Okay. This screen's a little bit different. We still have this status connected to the related controls. All that works. We have a reporting authority. It's kind of like that rate table. You have to just know which ones are the ones that are related to the other auth screen. It is showing, I think, ones that are other authorities, I believe. Yeah, it's not showing federal. I don't think you'll see federal on this list. Yeah, it's all ones marked other. But other than that, not necessarily all of them will be going here. So, again, a short list might help your users. You do have an effective date. When we do open enrollment and they go ahead and switch from family to, let's say, husband and wife, we do create a new record. So, again, best practices, we expect you to do the same thing, just in the manual data entry side. So, dental, effective 4/1, change of status. And the status on the dental side is employee and family. The medical is probably more extensive. Okay, so they don't have a child, they don't have employee plus child, just children, spouse, and family. Real straightforward. One thing to note, if they wanted to get out and waive, nobody has set waived as a filing status, and probably if you used open enrollment, we probably force you to have a filing status called waived, and then waived would have a zero amount. But anyway, we don't have waived as an option. So if they start picking up insurance through their spouse and they want to get out, the only way based on this setup to get that to work is to go to the related payroll control and turn both these checkboxes off. This is the accrual, this is the employer portion of medical, and the employee portion. If you click those off, then you're in essence shutting it down. And you have to do that real time between pay cycle A and pay cycle B. You can't do it effectively because you have no effective filing status that's waived to enroll them into with a future effective date. So that's completely consistent with the same conversation we had with rates. Does that, Brenda, make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. The amount is a field that can be used kind of like extra withholding, and I'm not sure really how we would use that, but you can put an amount there. It won't necessarily add it unless the payroll control has been set up to allow that. So that's the other thing you need to know is that if the payroll control doesn't even look to that field, it'll mean nothing. But it doesn't know better, so if I can go ahead and do this, I can put $10 in there. It'll accept it with no problem, but have no effect unless the control has been told to add that. So that's something else to think about. The proration cycles. So what happens is when you're using proration cycles is this is a bracket, and eventually, I'm not sure if we're going to get to it today, maybe we will, but we'll sooner or later in our training get to a full conversation of brackets. And in brackets, somebody might construct a bracket, and what the bracket's going to end up having in it is probably an annual amount. So for family, it might say $12,612. That's going to be the annual amount of employee and or employer or total premium. I mean, it depends on just what the bracket's doing and what its purpose is. But either way, consider in your brain that bracket's going to have an annual figure for that status. So then the question is, well, how do you want me to prorate that? And so the 24 in this example is going to take that annual amount divided by 24 to come up with the per pay period amount. The 12 is going to do the same thing, but again, I don't know what the plan is there. It very well may be likely that the life and dental are programmed to just come out on the first or second pay cycle of the semi-month. Now, I don't know. I can't remember. Is River Valley biweekly or semi-monthly?
I'm not sure. Do you know that?
I don't know that. But the reason I asked,
I want to say they're probably some biweekly.
That's what I was going to guess.
So if they're biweekly, it's odd to be divided by 24, right? And so that immediately tells me there's something odd going on, because the reason somebody typically puts in a proration cycle is simply because they expect it to be different than what the pay cycle will tell you to do otherwise. In other words, if you don't do anything and you use a normal amount is deduction, the system gets the amount, assumes it's an annual amount, and divides it by the pay cycle frequency, how many periods are in this pay cycle. So it divides, in your case, by 26. Well, somebody didn't want that. They wanted to divide it by 24. So somewhere there's probably a frequency. And what I want to show you, this is going to be a little bit going into the payroll controls, but I think it's worthwhile to do here, is if I go to the related controls and click on, let's just say, the accrual medical, this is the employer medical, and I hit advanced, and I go to the right screen because I went to my other monitor, and I go to edit, and again, wrong monitor, and I go to calculation. Voila, I have first and second pay periods. So what that means is that it will automatically not run this when it has a third pay cycle in a particular month. So somebody said, let's divide it by 24 and only run it twice a month. Now, I would have said, really? Really? I mean, is there really that much of a difference between doing that and writing it 26 straight out?
Yeah.
That's just me. But I can understand why people want to do that, because they want to take that annual amount and get equal amounts in for each month is what they're trying to do. I guess somebody wants an equal amount in their general ledger each month. Anyway, so that's basically why they're doing that. And where that 24 comes from is this reporting authority. So if I go into the reporting authority into its advanced tab, there's a default proration cycles, which is not filled in. Very curious. So that's not really great. So somebody has set this kind of in probably a package to reload this data, but they haven't come along and fiddled with this. So what that means is that if I come down here and put in medical again, you see what it's doing? I mean, whoops, sorry, I'm not putting a value of code. Okay, there we go. Okay, notice it's now a 0. You just defeated yourself. When you're using proration cycles, you need to put that default in on your other authority setup record. Otherwise, it won't come in. So just as evidenced by, and I can't get to it on this screen. Unfortunately, the way that screen works, I can't really edit it, I don't believe. So I'm going to, just 2 seconds, leave, go to administration, go to reporting authorities, and go to medical. And I'm going to go to default prorations. 24. Okay, you should always put your plan start date for your, this is when your plan start date is. You should fill that in for when you have medical and health plans. Fill that in. We'll come back to this later on and kind of explain it a little bit more. All right, so let's go back to our little dude. So when you go in here and you type in, well, you can see the 24 is just dropping in, right? Right. So you get the idea. So if you're going to do this, you really should make sure that your setups are correct. So, again, maybe it's been fixed already, but what that says to me is that somebody's thinking about it for the initial load, but they're not thinking about it relative to life goes on, right? And people keep keystroking things change. People enroll, they unenroll, blah, blah, blah. So you have to practice all of those before you go live to make sure all that is going to work and make sense. So hopefully somebody's on your end, on the truck end, is taking notes on that one. That definitely needs to be checked. All right, let's just kill those 2 records. Okay, so that's kind of a little thing. So now that I told you this is 12, okay, I'm not even going to look at this reporting authority because I'm assuming it's wrong, but I'm going to go ahead to the related to controls, and I want to see what that one set in terms of a frequency. So I'm going to kind of just go here, go to advanced, go to edit, second pay period, okay? So that just means of, possibly 3 in a month or 2 in a month, it's taking the second one, and it's going to go ahead and accrue it, and it's going to go ahead and perceive that as being an annual amount again. It's going to divide it by 12. So, and again, that's all I know by looking at that. What these guys are for is I told you the bracket basically is coming in automatically based on the filing status. Well, let's just say that there's an exception going on with this employee, and you want the system to use a different bracket, if you will, for one of these guys, if you will. Well, then the system can override that and take that automatically. So, in other words, instead of being, let's say the medical's $12,000, it could be $6,000. and then the 6,000 still further is going to get divided by 24. And where these fields are all used for is really in this worksheet right here, quite honestly, which is not going to work right now because there's no planned start date, which I showed you earlier. It's not filled in. But this worksheet allows you to go through and sort of say, well, does the family status change? Payroll's been processing kind of to take money from their paychecks, but yet effectively now they're changing their status on this date. So that means that they really, based on that effective date, they owe us or we owe them a certain amount of money, because remember, payroll's processing in an arbitrary way as it deducts the premiums versus the actual premiums you're paying to the vendor. And so the worksheet's designed to sort of figure out between now and the end of the plan year what the delta really is going to look like, and then it uses these fields to sort of plop the dollars in there so they can then from then to the end of the plan year finish off the employee and get it exactly correct. That's kind of the design of what all that is for. I doubt any of that's being used in any Ohio district at this point. It could be used, but it's not used right now. One thing to note that I felt like I learned the other day, and I knew this all along but I'd forgotten about it, is that these proration cycles actually don't work for the accrual. I think they only work for the accrual. I can't remember. It's one or the other. I just don't remember. But let me just try to find out the answer for you on this, because this is kind of an important little point. Because I think, it may not be doing the correct information that you guys want. Let me just look. Hold on. It's in a function called prorate. I'm just on the system looking. Prorate, reporting authority, and if it's post liabilities and cash. Yeah, so actually it's only on the employee deduction does the system divide by the 24 or the 12. So on the employer, it doesn't do that. Now it's still running no matter what, once a month, or it's running first and second, but it's not dividing that amount by that. And that's probably because, and if I just go look at the control, the AC medical, and I'm going a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I'm just kind of curious. Yeah, that's why. Because it's not prorate. It's the proration. It's not doing any. It doesn't need to do any proration because they stuck in a monthly amount, I guess, or just an amount. So it's just taking an amount basically. So it's probably. I'm trying to think. Probably what it is. Probably it's running. It's running on. Let me look at AC. Hold on. Let's do some more quick. This is where it gets complicated. Just want to see where it's running. First and second pay period. Yeah, so the amount has already been figured out to be 1/24th of the amount. So the bracket's holding the amount. Somebody took the annual amount, divided by 24, and stuck that amount in there on the bracket. So it's not doing any proration, because I'm sure during experimentation somebody figured out that this proration cycle doesn't affect the employer accrual, only affects the employee. And again, it's designed just to true up based on the worksheet. So anyway, I know it's a little complicated, a little esoteric at this point, so I'm going to stop with that conversation unless you want to have any more conversation about that. Yeah. Right now, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but it's more important when you're setting these guys up from the very beginning from a design perspective. This becomes real important at that point. Okay. So that's the rate, tax off, other off, pay distribution. So let's talk about pay distribution. That's another word for that is direct deposit. Okay. So we have a few fields here. We might have a couple hidden columns. Let's just see. I think we have quite a few hidden columns, but the ones I care about possibly would be this blocked field. Yeah. Pay distribution type I'll put on there as well. You don't manage the pay distribution type. It manages itself. And actually it's not updated, which is interesting. But that's fine. These guys must not be on the self-service, I suspect, because none of this would be working on the direct deposit. If I were to change their bank account to a 5, I think that it would appear. Oh, sorry. It's not letting me modify the direct deposit because this person's on a journal right now. So when the person's being processed, you cannot muck with their direct deposit information just to protect the integrity of it. So unfortunately, I can't make a change on this person right now. But let me just see if I can find somebody else with like two different. Try to think, what do I have here? Is that a teacher? All right, come on now. All right, I give up. All right, so this is not best practices in my mind. This is not how we normally would have it set up. But again, I don't think I can switch anything right now because I think I'm going to get the same error. Yeah, I'm getting the same error everywhere. Everybody's in the journal right now. But normally what you have is you have checking or savings or paycheck, which is pretty unusual. Rather you not allow them. The self-service system doesn't allow that. Paycheck would say, put a fixed amount on the paycheck and put the balance to my checking. So that's the reason why paycheck is an option, because let's say you wanted to put a percent or a fixed amount on the paycheck and put the balance in their electronic account. They have that capability. We don't allow them to do it on the self-service, but in theory, they do have that capability. I don't like it personally. So checking or savings, fixed amount or a percent of net pay. I feel like, quite honestly, I like fixed amounts. Normally, we do not set up this way. This is an unusual way to set it up. We normally would leave fixed amount 0, percent of net pay 0, and we click the remainder flag. We really generally always like to have a remainder record. And so that's really what you normally would want here. This is not the proper way to set it up. So just want you to know. I mean, I think technically it would work, but it's just generally not great. The transit number field is actually a lookup table. And it actually looks into a table that really does make sense to put the actual banks in. It's kind of a pain. Well, you can see somebody's done it, but somebody's gotten tired of it. Yeah, there's a lot of banks in there. I guess somebody's loading in all the banks in the whole country or something. I don't know. That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. But these are all unknown, right? And of course I picked an unknown one, right? Just because it's always the case. So we didn't always have that beforehand. In a very early version of our product, it was just a free-form field. It did check the integrity with the check digit and all that normal stuff, but it did not go from a lookup table. Later on, we were asked to produce a secondary report when we run the payroll journal and we export out the direct deposit file, actually create the ACH file, to print a report where we kind of summarize it by bank that it's going to, institution it's actually being deposited into, kind of a separate page for each institution. And we wanted to label the institution, and they just want us to do more verification. So that's why the transit number is actually a truly validated table. Right now on the self-service system, just so you know, it's not validated. And then what happens is that when you approve it and press that final button to sort of add it into here, it would error out. And it would say that transit number is no good, and you'd have to go figure out what it is, put it in, and then go ahead and process that transaction. So we don't want to stop them, but we do want to stop you. Well, not you, but you know what I mean, the operators, basically, that are approving this direct deposit change. Again, I want to reiterate, your training should be generally for a single account. It's checking or savings, and transit number, bank account number, and the remainder flag is checked. And that's it. The pre-note flag will automatically check if you have a setup turned a certain way. In payroll setup, you can actually turn off pre-noting. Not advising it, but there are a few districts that are very small that have decided they just don't want bother with pre-noting, so they turn off pre-noting. We also now offer, in a later release that we just put out there, I can't remember if it was 09 or 08, we put out a feature to run a pre-note only ACH file in between pay cycles. So you could come to the end and get close to payroll and then process an ACH and send it up to the bank as a purely ACH, purely as a pre-note file, if you will, all $0, if you will, and then that would clear the pre-note flags. What happens is you run that, and then once the bank says that they're all fine, then you just click another button and it just releases the pre-note flags. That way, you can eliminate ever having a pre-note in a live payroll.
That's
And that
nice.
and that is nice. People, that's the goal. People don't want pre-notes. They hate pre-notes. They think they're the stupidest things in the world. And they are kind of antiquated in a way. So how can we beat the system? How can we rig the system, basically? So all this is designed to try to give them a, God forbid they don't get a, electronic
Yeah.
machine. You know how they are. The blocked is an unusual thing. They can't do that on the ERC. But sometimes they call you and there's a divorce going on or something funky going on, and they don't really want it to be removed because they may turn it back on, but they kind of want you behind the scenes to just block that one for a while. I'll give you another one for now. Can you keep the old one out there and just kind of maybe I'll put it back on a little bit. We've seen that happen, and so in that scenario, that's what the block was for. If you block this single record here, it's the same thing as a pre-note. They'll go to a paycheck. But if you have two records on there, now again, one, by the way, you can't have both set as a remainder. So you have to at least take one off the remainder, and you have to put something on there. You have to put a fixed amount, a percent of net pay, or remainder flag. You can't leave it all blank, blank, blank. It knows that as a bad record. So you'd have to put, let's say, fixed amount of $1, percent of net pay 0, remainder take it off, block it, and hold it, and then come back later on. This pay distribution type is a field that fills in automatically, but it's not filling in right now because I can't show you how it fills in, but it's used in the self-service system. And it basically is just going to say, I can't remember what it's going to say, but I think it's going to say, in this case, I think it's going to say 100% of net pay, or percent of, it's going to just basically say percent of net pay. I'm going to switch my phone now, just for a second, to my speakerphone, because I'm losing my, there we go. I'm losing my headset. My headset's dying on me. Device. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, let me close my door, just because I'll be bothering everybody. All righty. I still have my gym clothes on. I did a workout at noon. I still haven't changed back. Oh, a mess. I just go from one thing to the next. Okay, so any questions on direct deposit? You do have change log here, like we had before, and this one probably will work. If change log doesn't come up, it just means it's not on. And I believe in this case it's probably not on. Well, I don't know. That seems odd to me. Well, I didn't make a change. That's right. I can't make a change to this record because I can't make a change because they got a payroll being processed. I can't prove it to you, but I think that one's probably working fine. But that's direct deposit. We'll talk more about the processing steps of direct deposit, obviously, but I just wanted to show you how the setup part of direct deposit works. That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, in terms of other things with payroll, we have obviously jobs, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about before I get to jobs. I think what I want to do is take a segue to payroll jobs. This is the master file setup of jobs, and kind of run through that, and then we'll come back to employees and look at employee jobs. We use the term, I think I got everything. We use the term payroll jobs and employee jobs, and so you guys need to understand that as well. Payroll jobs is kind of like the master file. So if I go into payroll right now and go to administration and go to payroll jobs, that's the master file. When we say employee jobs, that's when we actually take a payroll job and assign it to an employee, and that goes into a record called the employee job. So you have employee jobs in many to one table to the employee. Payroll job is for the most part your master. The only difference in it is it does have an effective date, and that's important. So we'll talk about that. All right, so we're still in River Valley. We're looking at their jobs. Their job field, I think it's a 10-character field. I don't know, maybe 20. I can't remember how long it is. I think it's actually 10. Should have made it 20. I don't know why we made it 10. Must have been on drugs that day. I don't know why. But you do have an effective date. And the reason we have an effective date is that some of these parameters every year can change. So an example, and again, this data is not necessarily filled in, but the default hours per day, the default days per year, certainly the calendar, because usually the calendars, the calendars definitely, if you're using payroll calendars, are going to change every year because they're dead reckoning down to exactly which days
are the days open. And obviously it's different days that are open year after year. And so what people do is they come in here every year and they go to their jobs and they copy them. That's what the copy button is for. So, I'll just go here to a teacher and let's just take an example. I'm just saying, and I don't know why this stuff's not filled in, but default hours per day, I'll say 7.5. They're working 188 days, okay, something like that. And so I might copy this to 090115. I'm just making that up. Okay, I come in here and go, you know what? On that day, on that year, they're going to work 189. Something like that. So it's a different way to store parameters, because when we roll the jobs each year, one of the things that we're going to talk about is rolling jobs. When we roll the jobs each year, the employee jobs now, we need to be able to set certain parameters in those new jobs appropriately based on a master file record. This is how we create layers of master files, if you will, if that makes any sense to you. So when we set up a job, we have a title, we have a paycheck description. So this is less characters, and this is what's going to show up on the paycheck. And I would ask you to be a little bit less characters here, because they can run off the page pretty quickly on the paycheck. So it's kind of good not to get too verbose here. And so some people, we have some clients that's extremely generic on the paycheck. So even though they have different titles, the paycheck description is very generic. It just says contract salary earnings, and says every single row, because they're really trying to trick the paycheck to not get into what they're doing, but just the fact that it's their contract. So that's why we separated out paycheck description from the main title, if you will. Comment is just for your own luxury, whatever you want to do there. Pay schedule code. So none of this is being used here, so this is obviously not a great example to show. But the pay schedule is if you're using a grade and step system. And so the question is, which grid is this job answer to? And so when you do a grade and step system, then you basically have multiple pay schedules, which is what this field indicates. And then under that pay schedule, you have a grade and you have a step. The grade and the step live on the job. And then the grade generally implies that they are, bachelor's or bachelor with 40 hours of credit, or a master's or master's with 40, whatever. And those usually are different columns on the published schedule, and the rows are the steps, basically. And so the system you can automatically say, this year we're feeling pretty good. We're going to increment everybody by one step. And the system, then you can have a pay schedule code, which also has an effective date. So also on 9/1, you could have a brand new version of the pay schedule with completely different rates. And so not only are we switching to a new schedule for the year, but we're also going up step, possibly. Sometimes we're not going up step. We're going to stay on the same step. We're not moving up steps. But because the schedule's a different schedule, they still get a cost of living increase, because it's the schedule itself. An MA3 is paid more in the next year, not much, but a little bit more, and that's fine as well. I don't know why this is not being used in River Valley, but is River Valley a regular district, or is it an ESC?
Regular.
Yeah, and I just don't know why they're not using this. I would think that it would fall within all those normal constructs. And again, I'm looking at data that may be very out of date, because remember, I couldn't connect in into the system because somebody else is on that user. So it may be that you guys have this already filled in. We're going to see if there's any values there. Unless somebody started putting something in there called teacher. And this is the way the pay schedule would look. And we'll edit, and we'll say teacher. And then we'll go to details. And look, there's some data. So that's a good example of how it would look. So if you're a BA0, your annual rate's going to be $35,613, and the top level's a 10 at $51,318. So that's an example. Now that's an effective date of the schedule itself. I can copy this itself, and I could say, let's go ahead and increase all these rates by percent, and we'll go ahead and do 2.3%, and we're going to round to the nearest dollar, and we'll round to the nearest is fine. And let's go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Except I said 113.15. Why did I do 113.15? I don't want that one. I wouldn't do it that day. Copy. Oh, I see. I missed that field. Sorry about that. Percent 2.3. Let's go to the decimal. Boom. Go. Details. And those rates, I guess, are 2% higher, 2.3% higher than what we saw on these rates. Okay? Straightforward, isn't it? I mean, nothing complicated here. But what that means is that obviously you have to have teacher loaded here. And doesn't, even though I have to look up, I see both numbers, both of them, it doesn't matter. As long as you have the code in there, it knows what to do. Because when we go ahead and roll the jobs, we ask the question, or the system asks you, well, what is the starting date for these jobs? And when you say 9/1, then it knows to get the rates using the 9/1 schedule instead of the schedule for the year before. Do you consider this job to be a full-time or part-time job? That's a very straightforward thing, nothing big deal there. That flows to the employee job. Do I consider this person to be a default 1.0? And you probably do. What's their default hours per day? How many days per year? That's just multiplied by those, and that's all that is. Earned Cont Sal. So the earnings code, this is kind of where it gets a little bit into the payroll area. So Earned Cont Sal is the earnings code that we're going to use for this particular job. One thing to note, and I'll just make this statement, not one time, maybe multiple times, but I'll make a clear statement hopefully, is that one of the limitations of K-12 enterprises is that when you're processing multiple jobs for an employee and they're multiple salaried jobs, which is unusual, but let's just pretend that the employee has 2 salaried jobs. They got to have different earnings codes. They can't have the same earnings code. The system will see that and will go, can't do it, and will fail, give it an error. So the reason that's the case is because of the way the system processes. It actually knows the earnings code first, and then it actually goes and figures out what job is related to it. And there's like no way to really easily figure that out. So you'll see occasionally like an Earned Cont Sal 2, let's say, or an earned salary. You can see these examples here. And so these are just used as ways to allow the system to have salaried type supplements and not have that conflict. So that's just kind of how that is set up. It's one of the requirements of the system. The reason multiple lines have Earned Cont Sal is because they presume that no employee will have these same jobs. This is the main type of jobs, and only one will have it. And even if the default here is Earned Cont Sal and it pops in a second time, you can just change it. Just do a lookup and pick something different. Doesn't really matter. So anyway, so they're not that important, but it's just important to know you can have multiple hourly jobs and per diem jobs with the same earnings codes, and that's totally fine because there you're data entering by job and it pulls the earnings code. But in the payroll calc where you're just dropping stuff into the batch, it's going by the controls and figuring out what job it is, and that's why the limitation exists. So I just want to explain that. Analytic category can be very useful in some type of analyses. I can't even think of which one right now, so I'm not going to worry about it. Payroll activity code is used in some states for some additional type of reporting. This can be very important. We use this in North Carolina a lot, or should use in North Carolina a lot. Override number of pay cycles. So this is now about the job, about the compensation. It's not about the deduction. It's only about the job and the compensation. Do you want to take the annual amount and divide it by something different than the pay cycles? So an example would be you've got a teacher 10. Let's say you had a code called teach 10. And in that example, the employee wants to be paid their annual contract over, in your case, over 10 months. So I guess I don't know if it's biweekly. I don't know how many cycles that's going to be. Let's just say it's 21 cycles. I'm just making that up. So it's 21 cycles. So if you were to put 21 in here, then when the system figures out the pay period amount, it will divide by this 21 instead of the 26. And so therefore, it'll take their annual salary divided by 21. And if you do 21 cycles between 9/1 and 6/30, if you will, then they're 100% paid out. And you're done. So that's a very important field if you want to pay people, and even though they're biweekly, because if you leave them blank and don't do anything, leave this value blank, then what happens is when you put them on the in the job and you put in their annual amount, the system will divide it by their pay cycle frequency, which is 26. That presumes you're paying them out all the way through the summer, or at least possibly paying them in a lump payout. You're paying them as if you're paying them over the whole summer, and then maybe you're paying them in a lump sum at the end of June. So either way, that's kind of what you're telling the system. But if you want to actually pay that annual amount over the 21 cycles or 20 cycles, whatever the case may be, put that value here. That allows you to have just one pay cycle for everybody in the district, which I think makes it easier to use the system. This is where this field was meant to sort of get you so you don't have to have multiple types of pay cycles running. Okay, so payroll calendar code. So payroll calendar. Have any of you guys worked with payroll calendars at all at this point? Anybody on this call? The payroll calendars are specifically set up to indicate what are the days worked. And even though I filled these fields in, it's also contained in this data here. So let me kind of go to the Advanced tab. And let's go to Advanced tab. And let's go to Edit. All right, so this is the 2014 teachers regular. This is their start date. They started the 18th of August. On June 1st, they're out of here. The system is computing that as 184 days, so I should have been 184. I was actually off with 188. And what you do when you do this is that somebody came in here and they maintained this, what's called standard calendar changes. And in here, they first put in, at least I hope they did, yes, they put in these two records, okay? Weekly recurring, Saturday, Sunday. By doing that, the system immediately, when you put the start date and end date, and you just put in those two little mini records, the system, when you close this, will immediately update this with a much smaller number. Okay, because now what it's done is it's taken that first day of the 18th, last day of the 1st, took out all Saturdays and Sundays, and boom. Then you're just simply going through the rest of it, basically, at the top, and you're just unchecking ones that are different. So this Monday, they're working a half a day. Now, I normally would ask that in the description you kind of put the reason why they're working a half a day on that Monday. And let's continue on. Somewhere they should have some time off. Huh. Doesn't smell right. I can't believe they're not off for any of the Jewish holidays. Don't they usually close for the Jewish holidays? No?
No.
Do it, Maryland. Let's see. You got Thanksgiving, though, at least, right? Got to have Thanksgiving. All right. Thank God. At least we get Thanksgiving off.
Yep.
So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are turned off. And again, I would have written in there Thanksgiving holiday on all three lines, personally, just so it's easy to see. And you can see what we're doing here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. So it takes you no time to set them up. It's a piece of cake. Work week start day. What is that? Oh, this is normally we want to know where's your week run I think for some future time entry work that we're doing. They're going to fill in these. These are fields that are new to me, actually. I haven't even seen these myself. But they relate to us defining what your work day is from a time perspective. I'm not sure what we're going to do with those. But anyway, so the concept here is mainly it's all about, it's really about two things. One is docking to some degree. And the other one is to be able to compute at the end of the year to say how many days they actually worked. Because they could take a day without pay, because they used too much of their leave. And so the calendar interacts with our leave docking system in that way. And also we're using it all over the place. We're using it literally everywhere. In the leave system, everywhere we kind of say, is this a day that's scheduled to be a work day? So we really do need you guys to make sure that these payroll calendars are kept up to date. They're on the payroll jobs. They're flowing to the employee jobs all correctly. So, and I'll show you a little bit about how we interact with them, not at this level, but at the employee level. So there's kind of two levels of interaction. One is at the master level, which I call base calendar, and the other one is more at what's called the customized calendar, which is specific to now that employee job record we're speaking of. So that's kind of how that all works. Encumbrance enabled. So if the district wants to use our encumbrance system, then they need to tell us which jobs are encumbrance enabled. So typically, you might have contract limits being set up on certain jobs in which you really don't want to encumber those jobs, those kind of jobs, because you're using it for some other reason. Contract limits are used to kind of tell us what the balance is left on the contract. So typically, before we added this checkbox, that was the criteria we used. If you had a contract limit in, we assumed that made it so it was within the scope of accruing an encumbrance for. But now we do two things. We look for the contract balance via the contract limit, as well as whether this job is marked as incumbent enabled. I don't know. Does Ohio talk about doing? I don't think they do any payroll encumbrances. Is that correct? Do you guys know?
Oh, I don't know.
That's usually a financial question. The Sanders of the world answer those kinds of questions. Typically, they may
Payroll
not. They
encumbrances.
kind of budget for it, and they just see budget versus actual kind of through the year. But encumbrance, of course, is a different concept where you have the budget out there, and then the first pay cycle we spin through and we spend actual dollars, but we know how much is still left to be paid on these contracts, so we're going to encumber that. And so at the end of the month, from a financial perspective, we can present kind of the budget. We can see if the budget is fully, if you will, taken or maybe overtaken, or not. So, I mean, having just a budget and having actual take from it, you don't know if there's problems, right, until you
Right.
get to the end of the year. So an encumbrance-enabled system, payroll-wise, gives managers of the districts a much better view as to whether they've hired too many people or possibly have the ability to bring on a couple more people, right? They can't really see that very clearly without encumbrances running properly. So,
Yeah. Ohio schools do encumbrances like that. So they, encumber the contracts at the beginning of the year so that they know what their payroll is going to be for the entire year.
yeah. So, well, the question is if they do that in a manual entry, we do it in automated entry, right? So you just press a button, it just does all of it for you. But it can't do it. It has to know the parameters to be able to do it. And that's what this field does help for that. So right now, I believe that they couldn't be in this example because those are set. So that's just my own view of that. But doesn't mean that they have it in production. But I'm looking at the outdated version.
Right. I think the state software did that too because we could usually see like how much they had left on a contract and everything like that when we did audits. So
Right. I feel like Sandra said to me that it's optional. Districts have a choice. You know what I mean? They can do it in state software. They don't always do it. It's up to them. And it's just those areas that, again, Trek, what's Trek's role in that? Do you just wait for them to come to you to say, I'm interested in that, or is it something that you say, hey, best practice-wise, we think you should do it, and here's how you do it? I don't know. I don't know how you guys do that kind of stuff.
I think we tell them that option's there, and we explain it to them. But if they use it, that's kind of up to them.
Right.
By all means.
Right. So the length of contract, I tell you what that's used for. Well, longevity eligible, sorry. Longevity eligible, we do have a longevity calculator now that can calculate how much longevity the employee should get based on years of service. And again, which jobs are the ones that are the jobs that are eligible for longevity. Is kind of what that's for. So again, I don't know if you guys expect K-12 to compute longevity, whether you pay longevity. Is Ohio a longevity-based state?
Some schools do longevity, some do not. And I think in the past, most of it was hand entered. It was hand keyed. It wasn't something that they tracked in the system. It was more like, how we were talking the other day of, what you were saying earlier about start dates and then some longevity is based on if you take sick leave and personal leave and that. Some are all just based on time with the company. So there's different aspects depending upon the district. But there is longevity that is done.
Yeah, and I find that's probably the case in most places. But of course, in North Carolina, they have a fairly regulated way that it's done. It's because North Carolina is weird because the districts are really just departments of DPI, the central agency. They're not really on their own. They think they're on their own, but they're really not. They get mandated, right? And so that actually creates the ability to have standardization across the state, which is good in some ways. But so that's why we can build something that actually works universally. But I agree. I think a lot of times it's very difficult. Obviously, if we know the amount, and I'll show you in a few minutes how we can sort of track it. I'll show you in a second how we handle that at a normal job level. But what this field here, 1Y minus 1D, is when I'm data entering an employee job, I'm onboarding an employee, and I put the start date of, let's say 0901, the end date's going to default to 0831 the next year. So, because it's going to advance it 1 year, so 9115 is 9116 minus 1 day, which is going to be the day before that. So that's just a way to sort of say, give me exactly 1 year later for the end date for that initial contract or any contracts that we're setting up. The expected months, is this a 12-month employee, 10-month employee? We don't really use it for much. It's just been there for a long time, and it is kind of FYI information. Here is the retirement category. So this is what we were talking about earlier. These codes here are actually really shouldn't be mucked with, meaning that the way it's built, it's actually, in a lot of cases within the programming, absolutely expecting those codes to be exactly like that. So even though you theoretically could edit this list, I don't advise it unless you're in consult with our guys, because this data is that what they're saying is that it's kind of like hardwired for each state. So in Pennsylvania, the choices here are completely different, and in Virginia, completely different. But the point is that within all the districts within those states, they're all the same, and it's designed to be that way. So I'd be very careful mucking with this without talking to somebody about that. So that's all I'll say about that. I don't know exactly. I mean, you can see kind of how some of the stuff works out, but I'm just not sure exactly how all this works out. I mean, we do have more expertise in this area than me, and so I don't want to profess to say I'm an expert in a higher retirement. I do know that this earnings, STRS earnings, drops in on this job versus SCRS earnings drops in on this job over here. So that part I get. And that's why I was talking earlier where we have the rates. You can have both rates set up, but really it just depends on the earnings. And I guess that's designed that way, so if the employee does have some SERS earnings and STRS earnings, the system can handle that for that one employee. That's probably the rates in both places for rates there. Don't know what this is. Position code, I think that's something in Texas. I don't think we use that in Ohio. Overtime compensation type, overtime pay. This to me, I'm not really sure what this is used for. And again, it's an area that I think we'd have to have a conversation. Brenda, you lose something? You there? And hang on, let me see what she said.
I need to leave for my appointment.
Okay, because it's 3:30, right?
Yeah, it's almost. I've got to leave.
Yeah. Well, I think what we could do then is because I mean you're our key student, right? I mean you're it. So overtime I won't get into. Nothing else is that exciting. We do have a block field there. So if you need to leave, where we would pick up next would be going to the employee card and set up jobs, right? And getting all throughout those jobs, understanding those jobs thoroughly, and so forth. And the next step after that is to process payroll as much as we can. Learn how to process everything in payroll. And then the more advanced part of it is the setup of the whole system, right? I mean, that's the final real piece to all this. So I'm just trying to give you a preview. What do you have? Do you have your calendar nearby?
I really don't have anything except for today.
Well, I do, unfortunately. I always do. This week is terrible now because I got to leave more freedom for my week. Next week is good. What days would look good? You want to do a Monday, 2 to 4 again?
Yeah, that works.
Why don't we do Monday and Wednesday?
Okay.
And I'll just send invites out to the same group at hand. Is there anybody that's not on there?
This Monday coming up, we won't be here.
Oh, you won't?
No.
Oh, it's Martin Luther King Day, isn't it?
Right.
You guys get off for everything.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we do this? Why don't we do Wednesday and Thursday next week?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep, that works.
And calendar-wise, I'm just trying to see who's on this invite. Oh, hold on, I'm already on the calendar. Let me see. Let's go here.
Hey, Andrew?
Yes, sir?
There'll be the implementers will be here in the office next meeting all Thursday and half of Friday next week.
Okay. Well, again, yeah. I mean, so James is coming to town as well, I'm assuming. And Chris, and yeah. So, okay. Well, I'll just keep the same people I have on here right now. I've got George, I've got you and James and Chris and Christina on there. And then, and Bill's on there. And I got Tina and Catherine on there. Is there anybody else on the, should I add, I don't need to add the Trekka people, do I? Linda Ratcliffe or anybody?
I don't think so.
You should know it by now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're hoping. Anyway, all right. Well, I'll keep the same group of people, and I'll just expand it out. And You have a nice day,
All
and
right.
we'll talk to you next week.
Okay.
Anything comes up in the meantime, you know where I'm at.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you. All right,
Hey,
Phil.
Andrew.
You can stop the recording.
Okay, Andrew, I have a question before you go.
Okay, go ahead.
You're recording these webinars. Are you going to be sending them to us?
Bill?
Yes.
Hey. Are you going to be sending us these recordings, Bill, so we can re-listen to them if we have questions and stuff?
Okay, so help me out. Where are you?
I'm at Trecca.
Trecca.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we, hold on, let me look. I think we put them out on their server somewhere. We did training, like one of the first ones that I recorded. I know that we transferred out to one of your servers someplace. I'll send you an email.
Okay, I know James sent me some links and I downloaded them and put them out on our shared drive here. So I didn't know if you were doing that somehow or...
Nope, but I'll find out.
Okay, yeah, James just sent me links from the week that he did, and then I had just put them out on our server. So I just wanted to check with these ones, see how we were getting those ones from you.
Yeah, let me go back to my email. I thought I sent you an email for the very first one that we did, and we would probably just do them the same way we did that. So
It's almost like, Bill, we need to have a central place we put them with some credential capabilities, you know? Just log in and get them and just leave them there. I don't know. 'Cause I hate to move these big files. Rather them download them than you having to move them.
Yeah.
well, I think we moved them to one of Trekka's servers or something, and then hang on a second.
Yes, George. George shows up as you're breathing. I love how this thing just senses this person's breathing. It's Catherine. No, it senses you. We don't have your picture up here, though, Catherine. Send us a picture.
I'm sorry, what?
We have, I don't know if you noticed, when we in our link system, we see pictures of people as they rotate through the conversations.
Oh, okay.
So I know that Sandra had her picture, because it's kind of like a Microsoft thing, right?
Yeah.
And so then we all see each other. Yeah.
Ours should be there.
We can do the webcam thing going on. Let me see if I got that. Yeah.
Let me find out, and I'll
Okay.
let you know.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Well, you take care, and